can you tell me, after having said we never burned our Gospels, we never burned, we kept our manuscripts, how the canonical Gospels were picked at Nicea?
How the canonical Gospels?
After, under Constantine, they had
yes, but the
all signed. They had been coerced. They had all signed the agreement that there was a Trinity. Then they said we need a miracle. How did they decide? And how many were there to begin with?
What's the we need a miracle? I'm not sure I follow that.
It's my understanding that at the Council of Nicea, the people that were advocating the idea of the Trinity, having won the debate, let's say, and everyone signed, including Constantine, who had also deified his father, then they said, okay, now how are we going to decide which of these 200 and some odd Gospels that are in front of us to be canonized? Which ones do we use? Are you familiar with the story, or am I losing my mind?
Most of the books in the New Testament had been circulating for years and years and years before that time. There were certain books that there were questions about, but the vast majority of them had always been recognized as canonical.
Can the Muslims answer the
I think the sister might be referring to something I read once, but personally I don't think it's in anywhere near historic. Was by one Muslim author who wrote that the Christians did something like put all the texts upstairs in a room, and then the next day they came up and found 4 on it. But well, no, I'm not doing this to make a joke about anybody, but just to be accurate. This is not really in any way near a historic account.
Conceding that.
Can you explain the events of the Council of Nicea in 325 AD? This comes up quite often at Speaker's Corner, and there have been many misconceptions about the Council of Nicea, whether or not it was here the Bible was put together. What is well known, and what we do know quite adequately, is that certainly the 27 books of the New Testament were well known, were well amongst the early church. The early church fathers quote from them extensively. What happened at the Council of Nicea? Basically what happened at the Council of Nicea was a canon was finally imposed on it. Now, what does that mean? You only need a canon because there's somebody else who's come up who's put a counter canon. There's a man named Marcion who earlier than that decided to create his own canon. He did not like certain books of the Bible, so he created and had a following of people that created their own canon, rejecting some books and adding others. It was because of that the Council of Nicea decided to then put a stamp of approval from the authority of the church with these are the 27 canonical books. That's all that's going on there. They were not chosen at that time. They had always had been chosen. Nobody ever had a need. There was never a need to put together a canon before that time. The same thing at Council of Jamnia in 80 AD. Why is it that they waited so late to have a Council of Jamnia in 80 AD to put together the canon of the Old Testament when those books have been around for hundreds of years? The reason why is because the Jews were now being dispersed, and they realized that they need to put down, they need to, you might say, give authority to these specific books, so that the Jews, when they took these, the Torah and the other books of the prophets into exile, they would know which were the authoritative books. Okay, that is why you have such a late edition. That does not mean that the Bible was created at that time, a misnomer that many Muslims need to be corrected on.
I agree with Smith, and since I've been rebutting him all the time, I may as well give him credit. When he says that at the Council of Nicea, the books weren't decided upon at the time. Many Muslims have this misconception to think that 325 AD, that's when the books were first selected. No, there are ancient records that show that Christians were, before the Council of Nicaea, using 4 Gospels and many of the texts which are now in the New Testament. So it may be that at the council they made that decision now to ratify what the Christians were already doing. You know, if somebody draws up a list of 27 books, the books must have been in circulation before. Somebody looks at the books which the Christians are using, and then he draws up a list. The books existed before the list. This is true.
To what extent were canon and textual problems discussed at Nicea?
To what extent were canon, the formation of the canon of the New Testament and the text of the New Testament discussed at Nicea? The answer is not at all.
The Da Vinci Code says they were, so
yes.
Who should I believe?
Yes. Right. I think you need to trust Dan Brown. He did a lot of research for this book. He learned, for example, that Leonardo's name was really Da Vinci. Yeah, you know, according to the Da Vinci Code, of course, the Council of Nicea was where there was a vote on whether Jesus was the Son of God or not, and it was actually a close vote. And that is completely bogus. Everything he says about the Council of Nicea is absolutely wrong. The Council of Nicea didn't talk about the formation of the canon, which books would go in, which books would go out. Constantine had no role to play in that decision at all, nothing to do with it, so far as we know. So that's just... you know, that's something he came up with. That is no bearing on historical reality, I think.
If you will,
story, or am I losing my mind?
The Da Vinci Code says they were, so
yes.
Who should I believe?
Yes.